Hello. Today I wanted to chat with you guys about the path to normalization. So let's talk a little bit first about what normalization is. A lot of people think that normalization is our goal when we're doing Montessori, but the reality is that normalization is what Maria Montessori realized happened after all of the work that she did. So normalization is not really kind of a goal, it's more of a result. So normalization is that moment when a child becomes peaceful, centered, grounded, when your child is helpful, when they are obedient, not because they're afraid of you, because you're making them do something, but they're obedient because they understand that when they help you, when they collaborate, then it benefits everyone. So a normalized child is a calm and settled child. But normalization is not it's not like riding a bicycle, right? It's not like, once it's there, it never goes away. No, normalization is fleeting. And it kind of goes up and down. So your child might have periods where they are centered and grounded and normalized, but then something happens in their life. It can be something as simple as they get a cold, right? It can be something huge like a relative dies and the child can sense everybody's heartache. It can be something like moving to a different house, like I am right now with the boxes in the background. And all of these changes, sometimes even, for example, in the classroom, it can be when an adult comes in and starts to observe, or you have a practice teacher, or your assistant is sick and you have a substitute coming in. Any of those situations can throw normalization off. And so if you see that your child is peaceful and settled and grounded because they've been, on a very clear routine and they're feeling very safe in their environment, and then you see that their behavior changes, well, you might want to consider what are the elements that are shifting that are causing that change in normalization. Now, let's talk about how to help our child reach normalization. So again, it's not a goal. I don't want it to be like a checklist where it's like, oh, if I do these things, my child will be normalized. Or, if I start in September, my child will be normalized by November. Like I had a head of school once who told me, well, it's November, your classroom should be normalized by now. Which kind of defeats the whole goal of working with the children that you have and not forcing them into molds, right? But there are certain things that you can do to support your child's path towards normalization. And so I want to chat about it a little bit right now. One of the things that really stuck out when I did my primary training, and by the way, normalization is mostly a focus in the primary years. It doesn't mean that an elementary child cannot reach this sense of being grounded and peaceful, but it's much more likely to be present, and it's much more important to focus on it in the primary years. But overall, the path to normalization starts with an activity that a child is interested in, right? So that's why the prepared environment and the prepared adult are so important, because the environment with the right materials and the adult with the right awareness will allow the child to find something they're interested in. Once the child is interested in something, then they will be driven by their human tendencies, by their curiosity. They will be driven to repeat that activity And that's why you see a 2 or 3-year-old that is repeatedly pouring water or repeatedly squeezing a sponge, dipping it back in, pulling it back out, squeezing it again. All of these activities that are repetitive have a purpose. Repetition leads to concentration, right? When a child is being driven to repeat, all of that repetition is helping them develop the ability to concentrate. And a child that concentrates is a child that will reach normalization. So again, let's recap. So interest in an activity, in a material, in an activity, interest leads to repetition. Repetition leads to concentration, and concentration leads to normalization. Now, that first moment of normalization can be very fleeting, is very delicate, and it doesn't mean, again, that your child's going to be grounded and peaceful forever, right? But what it does mean is that once your child has experienced that moment of normalization, they will be a little bit more inclined to connect with another activity because they have felt the power of that type of work. And so this is how a classroom normalizes, right? As you help a child get in touch with an activity, any activity. That's why the practical life activities for the 2.5, 3-year-olds in a primary classroom are so simple, because we want them to get in touch with something that they can be successful with, that they can repeat over and over. So once they are able to make this connection, they're much more likely to find another activity that they can again connect with, that they'll be interested in, that they can again find opportunities for repeating over and over again, which will lead them to concentrate, which will lead them to a higher level of normalization. And so you see how it's a beautiful cycle that you can encourage. Now, let's talk about what activities lead to normalization. Well, if you think about the concept of repetition, right? There are activities that have to have repetition. And what better way of finding repetition than in practical life? Practical life that's why in primary, when a child enters the primary classroom for the first time, the first few weeks are only practical life. The only things that you present are practical life. And this applies anytime that you see that your child has moved away from normalization, when your child is irritable or ungrounded, grumpy, even into the elementary years, back to practical life. And when you're choosing activities of practical life, trying to help your child connect with these activities, make sure that they have an opportunity for repetition. So let's think about some of these activities. They don't have to be elaborate. They don't even have to be on a tray. Okay. It can be things like outdoors raking leaves. Think about the number of times a child has to pull a rake in order to rake those leaves. It can be something like mopping the floor. It can be, for an older child, for example, chopping, right? The activity. Imagine the repetition of chopping a zucchini and the number of times they have to do it, and think about how that leads to concentration. And when you have a child that was able to work in a kitchen, or that was able to fix something that required a lot of repetitive movement, they will be so much more settled after that activity. So think about what kind of activities you can find around your home. Notice that they are easy for your child to do. They must be interesting, but they also need to be easy. Your child needs to be able to do them independently. A child is not going to reach normalization if the activity requires you to be involved, or leads them to the point of frustration. These have to be activities that are simple and easy for your child. Think about music, for example, right? If a child is practicing a piece of music over and over again, there's that repetition that leads to normalization. That's why music is children who practice music tend to be more disciplined, and that discipline is one characteristic of a normalized child. So it doesn't have to be practical life in the sense of squeezing a sponge. It can be anything that that is around the child's home that allows them to make that connection with repetition and that is driven by a child's interest. So think about what's in your home. We've been doing a lot of puzzles during our move because puzzles are obviously, very repetitive. It's always the same thing. It's like, what do I need? Find the piece, put the piece. Next, what do I need? Find the piece, put the piece. With my 9-year-old, he has been feeling the effects of our move really strongly. And so what did we do? We went into the kitchen and he chopped and he peeled and he stirred, and we did all sorts of activities that required normalization, and his level of peace just, went up 100%. So I'd love to hear what activities work for you in your home. Look around, see what you have. You don't need to buy anything. Use what you have. Look in your fridge. What can my child chop? What can my child peel? Look around your yard. What can my child dig? Weeds, pulling weeds is a great activity. Again, it's also repetitive. Anything that your child's interested in will inspire repetition. That repetition will lead your child to greater concentration, and a child who concentrates is a child that reaches normalization. Have fun with this. Let me know what activities you come up with. Drop them in the comments. Have a great day. Take care.